This is one of the most beautiful stories, the story of Juha and the highway robbers. Without any introductions, come with us to dive into the events of this beautiful story. So, let's begin. Once upon a time, in ancient times and in the past, speech is not pleasant without mentioning the most gracious, and prayers and peace be upon our Master Muhammad, the best of mankind. One quiet day, Juha decided. He traveled to a distant village to visit an old friend he had not seen for years. Juha gathered some provisions and tied a small bag to the back of his donkey, then set off, delighted with the new adventure. The road was long and rugged, but he did not lack a sense of humor. He began to sing and laugh with his donkey, adding joy to the journey. Juha was walking through the dense forests. He noticed that the sky was starting to darken. Clouds and the winds began to blow. He thought about returning, but he had already covered a long distance, so he decided to go ahead. After walking for some time, he reached a crossroads that branched into 3 paths. He did not know which path to take. Juha looked at his donkey and said to him, "What do you think, my dear donkey? Which path should I take?" Of course, the donkey did not answer, but headed towards the middle path. Juha decided to follow him, saying, "It seems that my donkey has a better sense of direction than I do." While Juha was walking on this desolate path, the sun began to set, and darkness surrounded the place. Suddenly, he heard a strange sound coming from behind the dense trees. Juha and his donkey stopped and tried to. Listening carefully, there were movements and whispers, and a group of people were hiding in the shadows. Juha was not unaware of the danger of bandits. He had heard many stories about them, so he decided to be careful. He grabbed his wooden stick and prepared to defend himself if necessary. Suddenly, a group of men emerged from among the trees. The gunmen were wearing black masks and carrying long swords. Their leader approached Juha and said in a loud voice, "Stop here, you!" The man said, "Give us everything you have, or you will not get out of here alive." Juha smiled calmly and said, "Oh, gentlemen, it seems I have fallen into an ambush, but I am poor and have nothing but this donkey, some dry bread, and water." The leader of the bandits laughed sarcastically and said, "Don't try to deceive us, man. We know you have money. Hide it. Everyone knows that you are smart and a trickster. So get out everything you have. Otherwise, you will be here." Juha began to think quickly, as he knew that confronting these men would not be in his favor. So he decided to use his intelligence to get out of this difficult situation. Juha said wickedly, "Okay, I will confess to you. I have a big secret, and if you allow me, I will tell you about it." And Sasha looked at the bandit leader with narrowed eyes and said, "What is this secret? Speak quickly, or we will make you speak in our own way." Juha answered, pretending to whisper, "I discovered a buried treasure in this forest, but I was heading to my friend to tell him about it. If you agree not to harm me, I will tell you where it is. We will divide the treasure between us." Juha's words aroused the curiosity of the bandits, so their leader said, "Do you think we will be able to do this?" Juha smiled confidently and said, "Understand your doubts, so let's agree on something that will lead you to the treasure. If you don't find anything, you can take everything I own, even my donkey." The doubts began to fade from the eyes of the bandits, and they began to think about the possibility of the existence of a real treasure. Their leader said, "Okay, we will give you a chance. But remember, if you fool us, you will not see the sun again." Juha nodded his head and said, "Follow me. and I will go to the place of the treasure." Thus Juha set off, leading a group of bandits through the dark forest. But in his heart he was planning a clever trick to free himself and his donkey from the clutches of these men. So what would be his plan? And how would he deal with the bandits? Juha set off with... The bandits in the forest were trying to buy some time to think of a trick to get them out of this predicament. They were walking in a long line, with Juha leading them, while the rest followed him with their weapons pointed at him. Darkness had fallen, and the tall trees were blocking the moonlight, which increased the terror of the place. While they were walking, Juha began to pretend. Focusing and searching for certain landmarks in the forest, he looked to the right. Yes, Sarah was murmuring mysterious words, which aroused the curiosity of the bandits. They wanted to believe that there was a real treasure hidden nearby. After they had traveled a long distance, Juha suddenly stopped at a large tree and said in a voice full of excitement, "Here we have arrived. This tree is the sign I was looking for. The treasure is buried nearby." The bandit leader looked at Juha suspiciously and said, "Are you sure? I hope you're not playing a game with us, or else we'll be the ones playing with you." Juha answered confidently, "Don't worry, gentlemen. I promise you that you will see something you never imagined before, but I need 2 of you to help me dig." The gang leader ordered 2 of them to... The 2 men began to dig enthusiastically, while the rest of the gang watched with anticipation. As for Juha, he began to plan his next move. After a few minutes of digging, the 2 men's tools collided with something solid. One of them shouted, "We found something!" The bandits rushed towards the hole and began to remove the dirt eagerly until they uncovered an old wooden box buried in the ground. The box was covered with dust and algae. It seemed that it had been buried there for a long time. The bandits were surprised. Even their leader could not hide his surprise. He looked at Juha and said, "I did not think that you were telling the truth. Open the box now." Juha approached the box and wiped the dust off the surface, then said, "Before I open this box, let us agree on... This treasure is for all of us. We will divide it equally, right? Or what?" The gang leader agreed. Juha continued, saying, "Okay, but there is one condition. This box contains an ancient spell that protects the treasure, and it cannot be opened except with a special password. If it is opened incorrectly, it may unleash a terrible curse." Fear began to creep into the hearts of the bandits did not want to risk harm because of an ancient curse. Their leader asked hesitantly, "What is this password?" Juha smiled broadly and said, "I will tell you the password, but you must all repeat it in one voice and with strong faith. The password is wealth and safety for all." The bandits stood in a circle around the box and They repeated the phrase in one voice as Juha ordered them, and while they were busy repeating the password, Juha took a step. Then he suddenly jumped on his donkey's back and shouted, "My dear donkey, hurry up before they realize the trick." The bandits stood in a circle around the box and began repeating the phrase in one voice as Juha had ordered them. While they were busy repeating the password, Juha took a step back quietly and then jumped on his donkey's back. Suddenly, his donkey shouted, "Oh, my dear donkey, hurry up before they realize the trick." The donkey took off at an amazing speed, leaving the bandits behind him in a state of astonishment and confusion. They tried to catch up with him, but the dense darkness and rugged terrain made it difficult for them to catch him. As he was running away, Juha laughed loudly, saying, "Oh, wealth and safety! We have escaped with his intelligence once again." The bandits stopped chasing after they realized that they had been deceived and returned to the box to find it completely empty. They were overwhelmed with anger and a feeling of sadness, but they had no choice but to return to the forest disappointed. As for Juha, he continued his journey towards the village, happy to escape from this predicament, but he did not know that the adventure did not end yet, as the bandits decided to take revenge on him and track him day and night to arrest him again. After Juha managed to escape by tricking him from the bandits, he thought that his adventure with them was over. He continued on his way to the village he was going to, singing and laughing, grateful for his intelligence and his donkey that helped him escape. But he did not know that the bandits did not surrender easily, but rather decided to take revenge on him at any cost. That night, Juha sat under a leafy tree next to a small river. He took out some bread and cheese from his bag and began to eat, enjoying the tranquility of nature around him. While he was busy eating his food, he heard a strange voice coming from among the trees. He raised his head cautiously, then muttered to himself, "It seems that a new adventure is looming on the horizon." Indeed, it did not take long until the leader of the bandits emerged from among the trees, followed by his armed men. They had managed to track Juha's tracks, and now they were standing before him with eyes full of anger. Their leader said in an angry voice, "You! Oh, Juha, you will not escape from us this time. You tricked us into a vile trick, but we have come back to hold you accountable for what you did." Juha smiled confidently and said, "Oh, my friends, have you come back to try your luck again? I promise you that I will show you another trick, even more exciting." But the gang leader was not in the mood to laugh or mock. He said angrily, "No, we will not allow it. You will be deceived again. This time we will take you with us in handcuffs, and we will decide your fate later." Juha realized that things were not going in his favor this time, and that the trick would not work with these angry men, but he did not lose hope. Rather, he began to think quickly to find a way out of this predicament. Then a bold idea came to him that might save him once again. Another said, "Well, you have captured me, and I have nothing to do but surrender to you. But before you take me, let me propose to you a deal that may bring us all untold wealth." The leader of the bandits looked at Juha with doubt and hesitation, then said, "What is this deal? Speak quickly, or I will not waste my time." "Hearing your lies," Juha answered excitedly, "I know the location of a real treasure this time. It is hidden in a secret cave not far from here. It is full of priceless gold and jewels. If you want, I will lead you to it, but on one condition." The gang leader said sarcastically, "Oh, another treasure. What is this condition?" Juha smiled and said, "The condition is that you release me immediately. After you find the treasure, I will not ask for any share of it. All I want is my freedom." The gang members exchanged glances among themselves, wondering whether they should believe Juha or not. But greed penetrated their hearts and finally convinced their leader, saying, "Okay, we will give you a chance. But if you lie this time, you will have no escape." From us, Juha immediately agreed and began to lead them through the forest, pretending that he knew the way to the alleged treasure. While they were walking, Juha tried to slow down with various excuses to gain some time to think of another plan to escape. After hours of wandering among the trees, they reached the entrance to a dark and wide cave. Juha stopped at the entrance. He said, "Here we are. The treasure is inside, but it is protected by a trap. I heard that the adventurers they entered this cave before. They never came out." The bandits looked at the cave with suspicion, but the greed in their eyes overcame their fears. Their leader said, We will enter, but you will be in the front. If there is a trap, you will fall into it first." Juha pretended to be afraid and said, "Okay, I will enter, but I need a lamp to see the way clearly." Your guide inside this dark cave was given a lamp by one of the men, so Juha walked towards the cave with slow steps, pretending to be searching for traps. As for the bandits, they followed cautiously, holding their weapons and watching every move Juha made. After they entered a few meters inside the cave, Juha suddenly stopped and said in a trembling voice, "Did you hear that sound? It seems—" There was something moving in the darkness. The men looked around in fear, but there was nothing to be seen. Suddenly, Juha turned off the lamp and threw it away. Then he turned and ran as fast as he could towards the exit of the cave, leaving the bandits in complete darkness. The men shouted angrily and tried to catch up with him, but the chaos he caused. Turning off the lamp made things harder, and they were distracted in the dark. They started to bump into each other while Juha took the opportunity to run away. He quickly got on his donkey and set off away from the cave, laughing heartily at the trick that saved him for the second time. But is his adventure with the bandits over? Or will the enemies return with more malicious plans after Juha once again escaped from the bandits with a trick? Zakia continued his journey towards the village he was going to. This time he was more careful, so he avoided dark roads and chose less popular paths so that the bandits would not be able to track him again. While he was walking with his usual caution, he began to think about the next step. Juha arrived at a small village before nightfall and decided to spend the night there. The village was bustling with activity, with merchants displaying their goods, children playing in the squares, and people exchanging conversations. Juha felt relieved, as this village seemed safe, far from the dangers of the forest and the bandits. He headed to a small inn in the middle of the village, where the inn owner welcomed him warmly, saying, "Welcome, sir. It seems that you are a stranger in these parts. How can I help you?" answered Juha with a smile, needed a room for one night and some food for Aziz's donkey. The innkeeper directed Juha to his room and offered him delicious food after a difficult journey. Juha lay on his bed after dinner and began to think about his strange adventure with the bandits. He wondered if they had given up chasing him, or if they were still after him. They planned to take revenge on him, but Juha did not know that the bandits had not surrendered yet. After the gang leader managed to get out of the cave with difficulty with his men, he was able to devise a new plan to trap Juha. They realized that using force would not work with a smart man like Juha, so they decided to change his accusation. The next day, while Juha was walking around the village market, a strange-looking man who appeared to be wealthy approached him and said, "Peace be upon you, Juha. I have heard about your adventures and great wisdom. I have a special offer for you." Juha was surprised by this mysterious man and asked, "Who are you, and what is this offer you are talking about?" The man smiled and said, "My name is Mustafa, and I am a well-known merchant in this country. I need a smart and brave person to help me recover my merchandise, a precious thing that was stolen by bandits from my caravan. I heard that you are good at dealing with swindlers, and I want you to help me." Juha had doubts about the matter, especially since the talk of bandits had aroused some suspicion in him, but he did not show his doubts and said, "This seems like an interesting offer, but tell me how you will be able to pay my reward if I help you." The man laughed and said, "Don't worry, I will pay you a huge sum of gold if you can get my goods back. But you have to accompany me to a nearby camp where the bandits are holding the goods." Juha thought for a while, and then said to himself, "This seems suspicious, but maybe I can turn things around in our favor." The man replied, "Okay, I will help you. But we have to be careful." Juha set off with Mustafa, who was none other than the leader of the bandits, disguised as a wealthy merchant, out of the village. They gradually got away from people's sight, until they reached a secluded area on the edge of the forest. Then the bandits came out from between the trees and surrounded Juha, laughing. Their leader said loudly as he took off his mask, "You have fallen into our trap this time, Juha. I thought you were smarter than us." Juha smiled and said, "Oh, you were clever this time. But I have a suggestion for you before you decide my fate." The bandits exchanged glances, wondering what Juha was planning this time. Their leader said sarcastically, "And what is your suggestion?" Juha said, "You are brave men and have great abilities, so why don't we work? Together, instead of fighting each other, I can show you new ways to get wealth in smart ways without putting your lives in danger." The idea began to interest some men, as they were tired of being chased by the authorities and losing their spoils. But their leader said, "How can we trust you?" Juha replied, "I proved my intelligence to you twice, and that means I can help you. I will give you a simple idea. There is a large trade caravan that will pass by soon, and it will carry priceless goods. If you allow me to leave, I will tell you all the details." The bandit leader hesitated, but for those who do not want to repeat the previous mistake, he said, "Okay, if you deceive us this time, you will not escape from us again. But we will." Your donkey hated him, so if your death is true, we will mourn the one who agreed. Juha got up and left his donkey with the bandits, then returned to the village quickly. He had a new plan in mind, but he had to execute it quickly before the bandits discovered his new trick. Juha returned to the village thinking about his new plan. As he was walking in the streets, he felt that time was running out. He had to face the bandits before they realized he had tricked them again. But he decided he needed an alliance with the villagers who might be able to help him confront the danger that threatened him. Juha entered a small cafe on the outskirts of the village, where a number of men were sitting, chatting. He deliberately tried to attract their attention, then sat in a quiet corner and began to talk in a low voice with one of them. His name was Abdullah, a well-known local merchant in the area. Juha said, "Abdullah, I need your help. Bandits are following me, and now they think that I am leading a valuable trade caravan. But the truth is that I am driving. They are in a trap." Abdullah looked at Juha in astonishment and said, "What do you mean? Can these men do that?" "They have mercy on them." Juha answered with a smile, "Yes, they have a plan to deceive us. But we will use our intelligence and make a more deadly trap for them. I need you to help me prepare a fake caravan, and you have merchants and assistants in the village who can help us." Abdullah understood the plan and said, "A good idea, but we need to make sure that the bandits will not—" They suspected something, and we would need all the tricks possible that night. Juha and Abdullah began preparing for the plan. They collected many fabrics and things that could appear to be valuable goods. They organized a fake caravan of donkeys and carts carrying these items, while Juha was telling them all the details to make it seem completely real. The next morning, before sunrise, the imaginary caravan set off on the road leading to the forest, where the bandits were waiting for it. Juha was driving it, accompanied by Abdullah, and the rest of the men were moving between the donkey carts, hiding their laughter in their hearts as they imagined the bandits' reactions. They reached a certain point in the forest where the bandits were lurking, hoping to find the wealth that Juha had promised them. When the gang leader saw them from a distance, joy appeared in his eyes, believing that this was the day he would achieve great wealth. Their leader shouted, "This is the caravan I was waiting for. Come on, pounce on it now." When he approached, The bandits of the caravan began to point their weapons at the merchants in the fake caravan. But suddenly, while they thought that they would seize the wealth, they discovered that they had fallen into a trap. As they approached closer, Abdullah, who was watching closely, gave a certain signal, and fireballs that had been hidden in one of the sound of the carriages was loud, and it emitted colored sparks between the trees, which confused the bandits and led to a state of chaos. At that moment, the men hiding in the forest jumped out, raising the slogans of the village forces in their hands, and surrounded the bandits from all directions. The biggest surprise was when Juha began to shout in a loud voice, You have fallen into a trap, you greedy ones. You are trapped in the hands of the village men, and you will not be able to escape." The bandits were very scared. They tried to escape, but the village men had blocked all their paths. Juha, watching the situation with a satisfied smile, approached their leader and said, "You have deceived yourselves this time. Do you think you are smarter than me?" The leader of the bandits was extremely angry, but he was surrounded by his enemies. He had no choice but to surrender. He said, trying to maintain his pride, "We will not forget this, Juha. We will return to you one day, and you will regret the day you deceived us." Juha answered confidently, "Maybe, but today you are the ones who fell into the trap, and I hope you learn the lesson well." Once they were caught, the bandits were handed over to the local authorities who had been pursuing them for a long time. The villagers celebrated this great victory and praised Juha's clever trick. As things calmed down, Juha decided that it was time to leave. He felt that he had completed his mission in this village, and that he must to embark on a new adventure, but as usual, he did not forget. To bid farewell to Abdullah and his friends in the village, Juha said while riding his donkey, "If I have learned anything from this adventure, it is that intelligence may defeat strength in the end." After the bandits were arrested, Juha felt very relieved. His adventure with them had ended successfully. But Juha, who did not know, the decision was made. He knew that the journey was not over yet. This village might have given him the comfort and celebration he needed, but his heart was longing for adventure again. The next morning, while Juha was preparing to leave, Abdullah, the merchant who had helped him with the plan, came to bid him farewell. Abdullah said, with a smile, "You are truly a strange person, Juha. I never expected to see bandits caught like this. I wish you a happy journey, and if you need anything in the future, do not hesitate to return." Juha answered with a smile, "I will return, Abdullah, but at the right time. As for now, I am looking forward to a new adventure. And there is always a place in my heart for places where you meet good people like you." Juha rode his donkey and walked far from the village, back to the road that has no end. He was still contemplating those moments he went through, where he was able to laugh in the face of difficulties and defeat the bandits with his clever trick. While he was walking, he felt that life every day presented him with new challenges and new events to live through. Juha knew that his destiny was always linked to adventure, and he could not stay in one place for long. As the days passed, his desire to set out towards the unknown increased, where his adventures were renewed, and he learned new lessons from every experience he went through. In the end, the small village behind him faded away, and the sun began to set behind the horizon, announcing the beginning of a new stage of his life. Juha did not have much, but he had something more precious than money. He had a mind that never knew boredom and an adventurous spirit that could not compromise its freedom. This was the end of this part of Juha's adventures, but in his heart he knew for sure that life would never end and that he would keep writing. new stories with every step he takes, as is the case with Juha. For a woman is not just a journey in the place is a journey in time and in the heart. And here we have reached the end of our story for today. And we hope that you liked it and added some fun to your day. If you liked the story, do not forget to support us by subscribing to the channel and encouraging us to present more exciting stories. And do not forget to activate the bell button to receive notifications. All new from our adventures and interesting stories. May God keep you in His care, and see you in a new story to come. God willing. Peace be upon you. The story of today is one of the most fascinating stories you'll ever hear. It will teach you how to be smart and use your wit to escape troubles. The story is titled Juha and the Tyrant King. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. Said that there was a sultan in an Arab country named Sultan Suleiman. This sultan was unjust and was known for his love of food. So one day, he decided to organize a cooking competition in the city he ruled. This competition was in the form of a cookbook that collected all the delicious recipes. He ordered his minister to give a cash reward to every person who came up with a new and successful recipe. So people started to rush to the guards of Sultan Suleiman to give them the recipes. Juha heard about the competition and said to himself, "Why don't I invent a recipe and give it to the Sultan's guards and get a reward? This is a simple thing." So he went to the official in charge of collecting the recipes and told him that he would give him. He described garlic with honey, so the person in charge asked him to dictate it to him so he could write it in the cookbook. Juha said, "First, you will peel a head of garlic, then chop it finely. After that, you will put it in the honey, mix it well, and eat it." The person in charge wrote Juha's recipe that he had dictated to him without adding or subtracting anything. After several days, the book was full, so the person in charge handed it in to Sultan Suleiman, who in turn gave it to his cook and ordered him to cook him a recipe from it every day. If he liked the dish, he would reward its owner with a large reward. If he did not like it, he would punish him and cut off his head. The cook prepared what the Sultan ordered him to do. Every day, he would bring him a new and different recipe from the cookbook, until that day came. To prepare Juha's recipe, he crushed the garlic and put it in honey, then mixed the two together and presented it to Sultan Suleiman. But the latter did not like it at all, as its taste was very disgusting. He asked his cook who gave him this recipe, and he replied and told him that the recipe was recorded in the book in the name of a man named Juha. The Sultan became angry and ordered his guards imprisoned the cook and brought this man called Juha here. Juha was walking with his donkey on the road leading to his house, so the guards stopped him and took him and his donkey. He asked them what they wanted from him, and they replied that Sultan Suleiman wanted to talk to him about an important matter. Juha was happy and said to himself, "Certainly, my recipe has impressed you very much, and you will see." When they arrived at the palace, they found the Sultan. While he was asleep, Juha asked the chief guard to wake him up, as he was eager to receive his reward. However, the chief guard refused and told him that no one dared to wake him up, and that he should wait here at the door of his room until he woke up. Juha surrendered to the order, but suddenly his donkey brayed. So the Sultan woke up terrified and shouted at his servants, "What is this?" The sound came from where? They answered him while they were afraid that it was the sound of Juha's donkey. and that Juha was waiting for him in front of his room's door. He came out of it and shouted at them again and said to them, "Why did you allow Juha to bring his donkey in here?" Juha, who was standing in front of him instead of the servants, replied and said to him, "My master, my donkey is not an ordinary donkey. It is originally—" The king was surprised by the Sultan and asked him what that meant. Juha explained to him that this donkey was originally a king, who had been turned into a donkey by the king who came before him because he disobeyed his orders, which angered him greatly. It was not appropriate to leave the king outside the palace waiting for a long time, so he took him with him. The Sultan was angry, so he grabbed his sword and headed towards Juha to cut off his head, but Juha stepped back and said, "Please, oh my master, forgive the donkey because he does not know that you were asleep. He was chanting your name and saying, 'Long live Sultan Suleiman, long live Sultan Suleiman.'" The latter said to him, "Who are you?" Juha replied and said, "I am Juha, a poor, oppressed slave, standing before the conqueror of evil." This Sultan calmed him down for a while. Then he said to him, "And you, Juha, do you—" "He knows the language of donkeys," Juha replied in the affirmative, "and that he only knows the language of donkeys and the language of humans." Sultan Suleiman asked, "Listen, Juha, I occupied your city and ordered my soldiers to kill all its scholars. How come they did not kill you?" Juha replied, "Yes, my master, because I am only a scholar of donkeys, not a scholar of humans. Perhaps you were the one who ordered the killing." Only the scientists specialized in anthropology. The Sultan was silent for a while, then continued his speech, saying, "But you will not get away with what you did, Juha." He ordered his guard to bring the plate of garlic and honey, and ordered Juha to eat it completely before killing him, so that he could satisfy his thirst for it. Juha began to eat from the plate, and he realized that its taste was very bad, but he pretended. It is very delicious, and he tells the Sultan that it tastes sweet, and that food has tastes, and if it were not for the difference, tastes spoil the commodity, as there are people who like a certain food and others who hate it. The Sultan was impressed by Juha's words and told him that he would be tested. If he proved that he was a real scientist, he would live a great reward, and if it turned out that he was not a scientist, he would be a seedling. Juha had no other choice but to agree to the Sultan's offer, who completed his speech and said to Juha, "I will go back to sleep, and our meeting will be tomorrow after the afternoon. But you and the donkey will stand here in front of my room's door until our time comes." Juha answered him that his donkey loves to cheer for the Sultan, and if he does it again, we will say, "And I will never know if you are a scholar or not. Also, you will not sleep peacefully, my master, because of his loyalty." The Sultan agreed that Juha should return to his house and return the next day after the afternoon prayer. Juha returned to his house worried and could not sleep all that night, as he had many nightmares for fear that the Sultan would kill him, and he did not know what he should do. Early in the morning, the Sultan's guards knocked on the door. They asked him to come with them to the palace because the Sultan wanted him now. Juha objected and told them that his appointment with the Sultan was not now, but after. In the afternoon, The commander of the guards replied that they were carrying out the Sultan's orders without discussion, and he had to do the same. Juha sighed and surrendered to the reality, and had mercy on himself, saying, "To God we belong, and to him we shall return." Juha reached the Sultan, who ordered him to prepare for the test now. There were 2 scholars in the palace council who were hiding, but the Sultan was able to find him, so he decided not to kill them before testing what Juha had done. He asked the first person, "Am I an unjust and tyrannical Sultan?" He replied, "No, I am a just Sultan." The Sultan replied, "Well, since you have testified that I am a just man, I will sentence you to death. Thus, I am a just man, and I will come to you with a clear conscience." He ordered the guards to, then he took him and cut off his head. Then he asked the second the same question, and he answered that he was unjust. The ruler said to him, "Your answer is correct, and because I am unjust, you will die." So he ordered his guards to take him and kill him. Then it was Juha's turn, so he asked him the same question, and Juha answered to himself, "You are unjust, tyrannical, and evil." Then he answered, "You are neither unjust nor just. You are a sword that has been unleashed. God is upon us because of the many sins that he acquired it, and you are the sword of destiny, and the sword is neither just nor unjust." The Sultan was impressed by Juha's answer, so he asked him another question and said, "O Juha, most of the sultans of your country have names, accompanied by the word Allah, such as Al-Mu'tasim Billah, Al-Muntasir Billah, Al-Aziz Billah, Al-Hakim bi Amr Allah, Al-Mutawakkil Billah, and other such names. If I were one of them, so what would you name it?" Juha answered with ease that he would name it, "God forbid." The Sultan laughed and said, "Are you insulting me, Juha?" He said to him, "No, my lord, God forbid. It is a name that indicates strength, power, and authority." The Sultan replied and said to him, "Okay, Juha. On the day of judgment, will I be in heaven or in hell?" Juha thought. A little while later he replied, "On the day of judgment, you will be resurrected with the sultans, kings, and great men, because you have left your names in history, and all people hear about you." The Sultan said, "Like who, Juha?" He replied, "Like Pharaoh, Nimrod, Karun, Genghis Khan, and others." The Sultan became angry and said, "Do you mean I will go to hell, Juha?" He said to him, "I did not say anything to you, but you can choose now who you will be stuck with as kings, or with the poor people." The Sultan was silent for a while and said to him, "Okay, Juha, we will now move on to the next test." The Sultan brought 2 brilliant scholars and asked them to ask Juha a question each. Juha was required to answer with only 2 words, and if it was more, his neck would fall. Juha agreed and replied that he would answer yes to each. Questions in 2 words, after all, the scholars asked him their questions, and the Sultan agreed. The questions were very difficult for Juha, so the Sultan ordered him to answer in only 2 words. Juha said, "I don't know." The Sultan laughed and said to him, "Okay, Juha, your last question is, if I were a slave and 70 in the slave market, how much would I be worth?" Juha said, "1 dirham, my lord." The Sultan was amazed and said, "But the clothes I am wearing now are worth 0 dirhams." Juha replied, "Yes, the The specified price is the price of the clothes, because you are worthless." The Sultan became angry and ordered him to be killed, but Juha quickly replied, "My lord, you remind me of the story of the lion and the mouse." The Sultan said, "And what?" "It is the story of the mouse and the lion." So Juha told him the story that there was. In the forest, there was a very strong lion and a very small and weak mouse. One day, the mouse challenged the lion and said to him, "Come on, let's follow the other one. I am sure that I will kill you." "Do you know, my lord, what the lion did?" The Sultan replied and said, "The lion must have pounced on him and devoured him." Juha said, "No, my lord, the lion did not attack him." Because he did not want to give the mouse the honor of being rewarded by the lion so that he would become famous, and all the people would talk about his bravery, and his name would be immortalized in history at the expense of the lion, the Sultan replied, saying, "Indeed, the lion should not diminish his value." So Juha continued addressing the Sultan. "And you, my lord, are also of great importance in this city and in the country, in the whole country, but I am nothing but a poor man who has no place in this city, and it is not right for you to equate your value with my value." The Sultan was impressed by his words and said to him, "Okay, Juha, I will forgive you, but I will be more courageous." He took him to a high wall and ordered him to stand on its narrow roof. Juha said to himself, "This is the Sultan. He's really determined to kill me, so there's no point in trying to escape. My death will be on him." The Sultan aimed his arrows at Juha, so he shot the first and it got stuck in his turban. He shot the second, and it got stuck in the sleeve of Juha's shirt, and he shot the third arrow, and it got stuck in the other sleeve. The Sultan was also impressed by his courage and said to him, "Sakaki, Juha, because you did not run away, I gave you a new turban and a new shirt instead of these clothes that were torn by the arrows." So Juha asked him to give him new pants as well. The Sultan said to him, "But I did not aim at your pants, Juha. He and Salim." Juha replied and said, "Yes, my master, but my pants got wet, and I am afraid I will catch a cold as a result." Sultan Suleiman laughed at him and said, "I really liked you, Juha." He asked him what field he was in. He understood. So Juha answered him, saying, "I do not understand anything at all." The Sultan thought a little and told him that he would appoint him as an imam. The Sultan answered him, "Yes, it is possible, because I killed the imam of the mosque and all the scholars of the city. And now I am looking for new scholars who do not understand anything, just like you." "You will accept, Juha, or I will cut your throat," Juha replied. "Yes, I accept, my lord, but I really don't understand anything." The Sultan said, "This is what is required." The next day, Juha went to the mosque and found it full of people. He was forced to speak to them, although he did not know what he should say to them. He went up to the pulpit and said to them, "Do you know what I am going to say to you?" The Sultan answered, "No." He said to them, "Then you are ignorant, and it is not an honor for me to speak with you." Then he led them in the Friday prayer and left. On the following Friday, he went up to the pulpit to deliver the Friday sermon. He repeated the same question to them. "Do you know what I am going to talk about?" They said to him, "Yes, we know what you are going to talk about." He replied to them and said, "Then there is no need to repeat it. Perform it." The prayer, so he came down from the pulpit, and led them in prayer, and left. On the third Friday prayer day, Juha asked them the same question, so the people were divided into two groups. One group answered him yes, and the other group answered him no. Juha replied to them, saying, "This is a simple thing. Those who know tell those who do not know." So the people began to talk to each other, and chaos occurred among them, so they went away. To Sultan Suleiman they complained about Juha and asked him to remove him from this position. So Sultan Suleiman sent a message to Juha stating that he must give a speech and speak at the next Friday prayer because he would be present, otherwise he would cut his throat. Friday came quickly. So many people gathered, with Sultan Suleiman in the front, to perform the noon prayer. But before that, Juha went up to the pulpit and began to give his sermon, saying, "Do you know, people, that the camel does not have wings? Glory be to God who created it without them. If it had wings, it would have flown over your houses and destroyed them. So thank God and be grateful to him for this great favor. Perform the prayer." Then he came down from the pulpit and prayed with them. After finishing, the Sultan thanked him for what he said in the sermon and decided that he rewarded him for this deed. So Juha was happy and said to him, "Finally, my lord, you will fight for my recipe." The Sultan replied, "Don't make me think of it, Juha, because my heart aches from it. Otherwise, I will change my mind." Juha quickly replied, "No, no, my lord. I want the reward. What is it, I wonder?" The Sultan replied, "I will give you a slave. From my slaves, his name is Shabur. He is a white and intelligent slave. Seek help." In your work, Juha took the slave Shabur and returned home. He was thinking about what he would eat, but there was nothing in the house, and this reward did not please him at all. How could he control it when he did not find anything to eat? In those days, the people of the city wanted to educate their children, and they did not find anyone but the imam of the mosque, Juha, to do so. By teaching them, Sultan Suleiman had eliminated all the scholars, so they went to him and asked him for that. Juha said, "Okay, but what will you give them in return for this work?" He replied that when the Sultan occupied their city, he did not leave them anything, so each one would give him what he had available, such as an egg, a grain of wheat, or a little milk, or some grains of rice, and so on. So Juha agreed to this and began teaching the children. But the people of the city did not give him anything as he had agreed with them. So he began demanding that they pay the tuition fees for their children, telling them that he had left his daily work in order to teach their children, but to no avail. And in the next Friday prayer, he opened the subject with them and told them. He called upon God to protect them from desires, and out of ignorance they believed him, thinking that the imam of the mosque was all. His prayers were answered, whether they were negative or positive, and they paid him whatever he wanted. So Juha decided not to teach children, but rather to work as a fixer. One day, a man came to him with a rooster and asked him to fix it for him. Juha was surprised and asked him, "Do roosters fix things?" The man replied, "Yes. My rooster used to always wake me up at dawn. Now he wakes me up all the time, because it broke down, and I want you to fix it for me." Juha agreed, and the man left. Shabur came in and said to him, "Sir, I am very hungry." Juha replied, "Me too." Shabur suggested that they eat that rooster for lunch today. Juha refused, but the slave convinced him, saying that they would compensate him. After Juha received his new job, the slave Shabur slaughtered the rooster, cooked it, and then he and his master Juha ate it. He took the bones and placed them on top of the rooster's feathers in a tray. The next morning, the man returned to collect his rooster, and Juha told him that he had not finished fixing it yet, as he had taken it apart piece by piece in order to find. The Chinese woman saw the fault, so the man prayed for his well-being. He went away, and every day he came to him to get his rooster back, and he started to get annoyed with him. So he said to the slave, Shabur, "This man started to annoy me. What is the solution now?" Shabur suggested that he make a cow out of straw and paint it so that it would appear real, then put it in the forest and hunt any animal with it and sell its skin, and with the money he would buy a new rooster for the man. The man was amazed. Juha thought of the servant Shabur, so he applied it, and they put the straw cow in front of the river. Then a big fox came and pounced on the cow, but the straw got into his mouth. Shabur came from behind him and pushed him forcefully. The fox fell into the cow's hide and locked it tightly. Juha took it and sold it. For the price, he bought a rooster similar to the rooster that he and Shabur had eaten, and returned it to the man who. He was very happy with it, and so Juha went to the forest every day and hunted animals and then sold them. He opened a shop in the city market and began to buy and sell animals. His business flourished, and he collected a lot of money, but Shabur robbed him while he was sleeping and ran away to a place that no one knew. So he searched. Juha looked for him everywhere, but to no avail. He did not find him, so he cried a lot and decided to travel outside the city. He would not rest until he found him and got his money back from him. So he went first to his friend the grocer and asked him for many things. He said to him, "How much money do you have, Juha?" He replied that he only had 20 dirhams. The grocer replied that it was not enough to buy all the things he asked for, but he said to him, "Since we are friends, take what you need and pay for it when you get your money back, and keep some dirhams in case you need them during your journey." Juha set out on his journey and found a caravan walking, so he joined it, and he took with him enough food, but he forgot. He took a large quantity of water and ran out of it, so he went to the leader of the caravan and asked him for some water. The latter told him that he had a large water skin filled with water, and its price was 20 dirhams. Juha was surprised and replied to him, saying, "Shame on you. The price of the water skin is only 5 dirhams. The man said to him, "If you like the price, buy it. If you don't like it, don't buy it. It's that simple." Since the caravan was walking in a barren desert, the heat was very intense, so Juha decided to buy it and started drinking very small amounts of it to preserve it. After several hours of the journey, the caravan owner's water skin ran out. Juha noticed that, so he went to him carrying sweets and invited him to eat with him. We know that sweets cause thirst because of the large amount of sugar in them, so the man ate with him until he was full. He felt very thirsty, so he asked Juha for a cup of water. Juha said to him, "Okay, I will give you a cup, but the price of 1 cup is 1 dirham. The man stammered and said to him, You mean the price of the whole water skin, not 1 cup? Juha replied, No, and the cup costs 20 dirhams. The man had no choice but to buy the cup, and thus he got his money back. Juha had more money than that, so he sold several cups of his own. After several days, everyone ran out of water. Fortunately, the caravan reached a well filled with water, and they found someone selling well water. No one among them had enough money to buy water except Juha, who bought the well for a few dirhams. When he went to the well to fill his water skin, and the people with him in the caravan, the owner of the well stopped him. He bought it from him and prevented him from taking any drop of water from him, telling him that he only bought the well from him and would not buy water. So Juha got angry and told him that we will go to Al-Kabi, and he will judge, while they headed together to the Kabi of that tribe where the Kaffa had settled. The sheikh of that tribe was Al-Kabi, and he was very smart, so he said to the man, You have 2 solutions, no third. The first is to get aroused by Juha's well and leave. The second solution is to pay Juha for the well that he rented for you so that you could sell your water in it. The man knew that his trick did not work, so he surrendered and left it to Juha with the water in it. H returned to the well victorious and took from it what he had taken. He needed water, and then he continued his journey in search of the slave Shabur in the cities, tribes, mountains, and villages. But he did not find him, so he gave up and decided to return to his city. And this time he also joined a caravan that was returning to his country. Suddenly he saw the slave Shabur, in very loose clothes and surrounded by many guards and rubble, so he could not believe what he saw. His eyes pounced on him, and Juha pounced on him while the slave was screaming at him, Shabur, you thief! I have finally found you. Shabur was surprised to see Juha, and the slave Juha said to him, This is you. Juha is amazing. The slave Juha replied, I am your master, Juha. Shabur replied, Yes, you are the slave Juha. He called his guards and ordered them to arrest him, as he was the slave who had escaped from him, saying to them, This is the slave you told about. He told me before that he stole money from me. Now seize him, and we will take him to the judge. When they arrived at the judge, Juha swore to him that he was the master and that Shab was the slave from whom the money was stolen. Shab also acted exactly as Juha did. The judge was very intelligent, so he asked the 2 of them to go to the window. And he looked through it, but none of them stuck his head out. So Juha and Shabura said, As for the judge, he called the guard in charge of implementing the ruling of cutting off heads and ordered him to go to the other side of the window and await his order. The guard went to the other side of the window, so the judge ordered him in a loud voice to cut off the slave's head. Suddenly, it started to look like Shabur. He screamed and said, Don't cut my neck, please. As for Juha, he was very calm. The judge knew the truth, that Shabur was the slave and his master was Juha. The judge protested and cut off his hands because he had stolen from Juha, who had recovered all his money and returned with it to his city. Sultan Suleiman heard that Juha had become very rich and knew his story, so he decided to. He watched him and said to himself, Perhaps he might buy soldiers establish an army and fight against me. I must discover whether he is a smart or stupid scientist. If it is proven that he is a smart scientist, then he poses a danger to me. If it is proven otherwise, and that he is stupid, then it does not matter if I become rich." His soldiers began to watch him, but Juha was certain of them, so he thought about. He found a trick to get out of this predicament. When night fell, he went to a well in which the moon's face was reflected. He began to cry and say, "My dear, you have fallen into the well. Do not be afraid. I will save you." So he went and brought a bucket tied to a long rope and lowered it into the well. In this bucket was a medium-sized stone that he had placed. Juha was inside, but no one saw him. Then he waited a few moments and started pulling the bucket. He pushed the bucket up forcefully until it came out and fell to the ground, and Juha fell with it. The stone made a sound, so Juha opened his eyes while lying on the ground and saw the moon in the sky. He said to him, "Thank God I saved you." The soldiers told the Sultan what had happened, and the Sultan was relieved and confirmed that he was stupid. Thus, Juha lived happily. If you like the story, please subscribe to the channel to encourage us to continue. Don't forget to activate the bell button to receive everything new. Like and leave a comment for us. This is a story you must hear before it's too late. The story is titled The Dog Meat Seller. Without further ado, let's dive into its events. In the beginning, the older brother was known among the villagers for his integrity and honesty in his work, as he used to prepare the kabsa with his own hands and sell it in a way that would please God. He always smiled at the customers, asked about their conditions, and gave each person his due without any cheating or deception. The kabsa shop was in the middle of the village, attracting people from everywhere. Thanks to his good reputation and honesty, but after his death, Sami took over the shop, trying to follow in his brother's footsteps. In the early days, Sami worked hard to meet customers' demands, and the kabsa was very popular. The shop's profits began to increase, which made him feel successful and satisfied with himself. One day, the shop was crowded as usual. A customer named Hussein arrived and asked for a quantity of kabsa to take with him. Sami looked into the pot and then said to Hussein, "There is only 1 kilo of kabsa left. The quantity is almost finished." Hussein agreed and took what was left and left, leaving Sami confused because the meat had run out. Sami decided to go to the nearby meat merchant to buy more, and he continues his work. But the surprise was waiting for him when the merchant told him that the price of meat had suddenly doubled. Sami returned to the shop frustrated and decided to raise the price of kabsa to compensate for the price difference. But he was surprised when most of the customers left and were unable to bear the new prices. Sami saw that his friend Hussein had left the shop after noticing the high prices, so he called him, saying, "Hussein, the prices. It rose because the price of meat increased, and I had to increase the price of kabsa as well." "What is my fault in that?" Hussein replied, saying, "But at these prices I cannot buy kabsa." Then he left the place. 2 days passed and no customer came to Sami's shop. The kabsa began to spoil, and an unpleasant smell began to spread in the place. Sami sat sadly. He thought that his shop was always crowded with customers, but now the kabsa remained unsold and was no longer fit to eat. He threw it away in a faraway place. Sami took the spoiled kabsa and went to a deserted area to get rid of it. As soon as he put it on the ground, its smell attracted a large group of stray dogs that came running when Sammy saw this. The scene made him think of something strange, so he said to himself, "The number of dogs here is greater than the number of sheep. Why? I do not benefit from it and save on the cost of meat." Sam's added a portion of dog meat to the kabsa, and no one would notice the difference. Sammy began to implement his idea, so he bought a small amount of real meat and mixed it with dog meat to make a mixed kabsa. As soon as Sammy commented on the old price, the customers returned to his shop. The first of them was Hussein, who, as soon as he saw the sign, he quickly entered and said to Sammy with a wide smile, "Well done, Sammy. You've gone back to the old prices. I really miss the taste of the kabsa you prepare. Please bring me a quick plate." Sammy quickly prepared the kabsa plate for Hussein, but what Hussein did not know was that Sammy had decided to reduce the costs. Preparation. Because lamb meat was expensive, Sammy thought of mixing it with the meat of stray dogs that he found in the remote area. Thus, the kabsa dish presented to Hussein contained a small piece of real meat, while the rest was mixed meat. Hussein began to eat the dish with appetite. After a few steps, he suddenly stopped and smiled, saying, "Delicious as usual, but I feel that the taste of one of the pieces is a bit strange. I have eaten meat like this before." Sammy smiled nervously and replied, "Oh, maybe because I bought this meat from a new supplier. The taste might be a little different. Enjoy your meal and don't worry." Hussein continued eating the mixed kabsa with appetite without suspecting anything. After he finished his meal and paid the bill, he suddenly felt a strange voice. A sound like a dog barking came from his throat. He became worried and said to Sammy, laughing a little, "What is this? It seems that I hear dogs barking from my throat. Is this normal?" Sammy laughed, trying to hide his nervousness, and said, "Perhaps it's the effect of the new meat. Don't worry. Everything is fine." As time passed, the problem began to get worse. So every time Hussein spoke, he was making a strange barking sound unintentionally. Hussein felt embarrassed and decided to see a doctor to find out the reason for this annoying sound. He did not know that its secret lies in the mixed kabsa that he ate at Sammy's shop. Hussein went to his wife. After she heard his voice making sounds similar to the barking of dogs, she was struck by. She was shocked and said, "What happened? Did you get bitten by a dog or what? Why is the barking sound coming from your mouth?" Hussein answered, saying, "Since I ate kabsa from Sammy's shop, I have been suffering from these strange sounds." His wife said, "Let's go to him and ask him about the food." She took her husband, and they went to Sammy's shop. When they arrived, the shop was crowded with customers eating kabsa with satisfaction. The wife called out in a loud voice, saying, "Sammy, what did you add to the food?" "The kabsa that I served to my husband surprised the customers, and they started looking at it. So I continued saying, 'Ever since my husband ate your kabsa, it has been making sounds like dogs. Did you put something strange in it?' The customers exchanged worried looks, and one of them, whose name was Salim, said, 'I was eating dog meat without knowing.' Everyone felt disgusted and stopped eating, and it began. Some of them left the food while whispering words of anger and resentment. The situation turned into a crowd around Sammy, where one of the customers said, "We trust you and eat from you every day. How can you deceive us like this?" Sammy felt confused and began to step back while the customers became more angry, until he decided to flee the store immediately before, to be able to catch him. Then a number of customers flocked to the police station and filed a report against him. The police arrived at the shop to investigate the matter and arrested Sammy after they confirmed that he was selling dog meat instead of other meat. News of his actions spread among the villagers, and angry demonstrations gathered in front of the shop, denouncing his fraud and betrayal of trust after he was arrested. On Sammy, he confessed to his crime of selling dog meat to customers. The authorities decided to impose strict penalties on him. He was sentenced to a long prison term to serve as a lesson to anyone who tries to cheat and tamper with people's health. His shop was completely closed by order of the authorities. The municipality also ordered the place to be cleaned to ensure that such acts are not repeated in the future. As for Hussein, he went with his wife to the doctor, where he underwent a thorough medical examination. The wife said to the doctor, "Since my husband ate Sammy's kabsa, he has been making dog sounds." The doctor said in surprise, "Kabsa is a dog's kabsa. People eat lamb or chicken kabsa. Where did you get kabsa with dog meat? How did it taste?" Hussein replied angrily, "Doctor, I came here for treatment, not to ask you about the taste." The doctor reassured him, saying, "Don't worry, I will perform a simple operation to cut off the vocal cords that give you this sound, and you will never hear dogs barking again." Upon hearing this, Hussein was so terrified that his voice returned to normal completely, without any strange sounds. The doctor laughed and said, "Were you crazy to think that I would cut your throat?" "Don't worry. It seems that the voice has disappeared." The wife laughed and said, "Look, my dear, there is no need for surgery anymore. I just spoke very clearly without any dog noise." After a period of exciting events, everything returned to normal in the village. The villagers became more careful about choosing reliable places for food, and learned that quality and honesty are the basis of health. As for Sammy, he got his just punishment and became a lesson to everyone who tries to cheat. As for Hussein, he returned to his normal life and also learned the importance of making sure of the source of food before eating it. In the end, the village continued on its path towards the better, hoping that this story will be a lesson to everyone. If you like this story, do not forget to subscribe to our channel. To be the first to follow the latest exciting stories and adventures, thank you for your support, and we hope you have a great time with more from the stories. Today's story is unlike any other. This is the tale of Juha and the Enchanted Treasure, one of Juha's longest and most exciting adventures, filled with wit and surprises. But before we begin, don't forget to support us by subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. If you enjoy this tale, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. Now, without further ado, let's dive deep into this thrilling adventure. One day, Juha was sitting under a large tree in front of his house, sipping a cup of tea and gently patting his donkey's head. Just then, an old man approached, looking exhausted. The old man said, "Juha, I've heard that you are the smartest man in the village, and I need your help with a serious matter." Juha raised his eyebrows with curiosity and replied, "Serious? Tell me, what is it? The man sighed and lowered his voice. Many years ago, there was a wealthy merchant named Mansour. He possessed an unimaginable amount of gold, but before he disappeared forever, he hid it in a secret location. No one has ever been able to find it, but there's an ancient map that says the treasure is buried in the cursed forest. The old man's voice trembled as he mentioned cursed forest, but Juha simply laughed and said, "The cursed forest? You mean the one everyone fears because of silly ghost stories? My friend, ghosts are more afraid of me than I am of them." The old man insisted, "But there's a catch. The map is incomplete, and the path to the treasure is full of dangers. No one who has entered that forest has ever returned safely." Juha smirked and said, "Well then, this sounds like a new challenge for me. I'll go myself and return with the gold." Without hesitation, Juha packed his bag, secured it on his donkey's back, grabbed the map, and set off on his adventure. As he entered the forest, the air grew colder, and the towering trees blocked out the sunlight. Strange birds chirped in the distance, but Juha wasn't easily frightened. He glanced at the map and saw that it pointed to a massive tree called the Black Raven Tree, the starting point of his quest. He walked for hours until he finally found the tree, only to face a new problem. There were 3 different paths ahead, and he had no idea which one to take. Turning to his donkey, Juha said, "My friend, which path should we take? You're smarter than you look." The donkey stared at the 3 paths, then confidently trotted toward the middle one. Juha chuckled and said, "Looks like my donkey has better instincts than I do. All right, let's follow him." After hours of walking, Juha reached a wide river. The only bridge was broken. He muttered to himself, "Another challenge. How am I going to cross this?" Then he noticed some old ropes and scattered wooden planks nearby. Using the ropes, he carefully tied the planks together, creating a small bridge. Step by step, he cautiously walked across, while his donkey stood on the other side, watching him in astonishment. After continuing on his journey, Juha arrived at a large cave. As soon as he stepped inside, he was startled to find a group of masked men wielding swords. They were bandits, also searching for the treasure. Their leader stepped forward and demanded, "Who are you, stranger? And what are you doing here?" Juha smiled and replied, "Oh, I'm just a lost traveler looking for shelter, but it seems I've entered the wrong place." The leader laughed mockingly. "Don't lie. We know you're here for the treasure. Now, hand over the map immediately, or you won't leave this cave alive." Juha thought quickly, and then spoke slyly. "Oh, gentlemen, no need for violence. Let's make a deal. I will lead you to the treasure, but on one condition." The leader narrowed his eyes. "What condition?" Juha replied, "You must let me check the area first to ensure it's safe. There are dangerous traps guarding the treasure." The leader glanced at his men, then nodded. "Fine, but if you try to trick us, this cave will be your grave." Juha took out the map and led them deeper into the cave until they reached a hidden chamber. Ancient carvings covered the walls, and in the center stood a massive stone chest, appearing to conceal something valuable. Juha stepped closer and said, "All right, gentlemen, I will open the chest. But you must all step back. It could be booby-trapped." The bandits hesitated, then cautiously moved away. Juha began muttering strange words, pretending to chant a magical spell. Then, suddenly, he shouted, "It's a trap! The walls are about to collapse!" Panicked, the bandits bolted toward the exit, leaving everything behind. Juha seized the opportunity, quickly opening the chest. Inside, He found a bag filled with gold and sparkling jewels. He smirked. "Fooled them again! Now, I must leave before they come back." Juha stuffed the treasure into his bag, rushed out of the cave, mounted his donkey, and rode as fast as he could back to his village. When he returned, he shared his thrilling adventure with the villagers, but he didn't reveal the full extent of his discovery. Instead, he used the treasure to build a water well for the poor and help those in need. Soon, his legend spread across the neighboring villages as the man who had dared to enter the cursed forest and returned victorious. As for the bandits, when they finally returned to the cave, they found it completely empty. Furious and defeated, they realized they had been outwitted. But there was nothing they could do. Juha had once again proven that he wasn't just a witty trickster, but a true genius in the face of danger. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to support us by liking, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with your friends. See you soon in another exciting tale. Today's story is one of the very touching and inspiring stories. The story is entitled Brothers and Inheritance. Without further introduction, let us dive into the depths of this story. In a distant village, a boy named Kasim lived with his family. He was the youngest and weakest among his brothers. Unlike them, he did not work in the fields. Instead, he stayed home to help his mother with daily chores. Because of this, his brothers mocked him and saw him as useless. When their father passed away, life became even harder for Kasim. His brothers took all the land and wealth, leaving him with nothing but an old pickaxe. Feeling abandoned and powerless, Kasim realized he had no place among them. So, he decided to leave and find his own destiny. As he walked, he reached the shore of a calm lake, where the sunlight shimmered on the water. An idea struck him. He gathered wood and tied it to an old tub his brothers had given him. Using this, he built a small boat and sailed across the lake, hoping for a new beginning. On the other side, he saw a grand palace. Curious, he entered and met the king, asking for a job. The king was surprised and asked what he owned. Kasim smiled and said, "Only this old pickaxe." The king laughed and said, "You may not have much, but luck can work wonders." Then he gave Kasim a job as a palace servant. Over time, Kasim became well-liked for his honesty and bravery. While living in the palace, he met Princess Layla, the king's daughter, known for her beauty and intelligence. Many noblemen and warriors sought her hand in marriage, but she was not impressed by gifts or promises. She wanted someone who could prove their worth. Layla set a difficult challenge. Anyone who wished to marry her must retrieve 4 rare treasures from a powerful giant across the lake. These treasures were a golden sword from a great battle, 3 golden hens that laid rare eggs, a glowing lantern that shone in the darkest night, and a magical harp that played enchanting melodies. The challenge spread across the kingdom, attracting princes and mighty warriors. However, when they faced the giant, they all failed. His enormous size and fiery eyes struck fear into anyone who dared approach him. Then came Kasim, holding only his old pickaxe, ready to face his fate. One by one, the warriors had fallen, unable to defeat the giant. The king, heartbroken, feared for his daughter's future. According to the kingdom's traditions, Princess Layla could not remain unmarried. The king had to pass his throne to her future husband. But as time passed, hope faded, and the kingdom's future seemed uncertain. Hearing about the giant and his treasures, Kasim thought of Princess Layla. Her beauty and wisdom filled his mind, and a daring idea took shape. Why couldn't he be the one to retrieve the treasures and win her heart? On a bright morning, Kasim gathered his courage and headed to the palace. The place was full of activity, guards in their uniforms and nobles whispering about the warriors' failures. But Kasim didn't hesitate. He walked steadily until he stood before the throne, where the king sat with a worried expression. With a confident voice, Kasim said, "Your Majesty, I want to take on the challenge and retrieve the treasures from the giant. I want to prove that I can succeed where others have failed." Hearing this, the king's face darkened with anger. His voice boomed like thunder in a stormy sky. "Do you think that, as a mere servant, you can succeed where the greatest warriors have failed?" He spoke not only in disbelief but also out of concern, fearing for Kasim's life. But Kasim didn't back down. He met the king's gaze and said firmly, "Please, Your Majesty, give me a chance. I may be young, but I believe in courage and determination. I promise to do my best." The king studied the boy's face. He was torn between doubt and curiosity. After a long silence, he finally allowed Kasim to go, though his voice was heavy with sorrow. "But this journey may cost you your life. I will grieve if you do not return. Do you understand the risks?" In that moment, Kasim felt both fear and inspiration. He knew this was more than just an adventure. It was a true test of his bravery. But his determination was stronger than his doubts. Gripping his old pickaxe tightly, he set off. Reaching the lake, he checked his small boat, built from an old tub, then climbed in and rowed quietly across the water. When he reached the other shore, he carefully made his way to the giant's home and hid there overnight. At dawn, the giant woke up and marched to his barn, the ground shaking under his massive footsteps. His loud grunts echoed through the mountains. Kasim's heart pounded, but he remained calm. He picked up a handful of small stones and climbed onto the barn's roof. Through a small gap, he saw the giant holding his enormous golden sword. The sword hummed whenever the giant became angry. Kasim saw an opportunity. He threw a small stone at the sword. It let out a loud ringing sound. The giant stopped and looked around. "Why is my sword ringing? I am not angry," he muttered, confused. But after a moment, he continued his work. Kasim threw another stone, then a third. This time, the giant grew furious. With a roar, he yanked off his belt and threw the sword outside the barn. Then, he went back to his work. Seizing his chance, Kasim jumped down, grabbed the golden sword, and ran toward his boat. His heart raced as the waves pushed him forward. When he reached the other shore, he hid the sword behind a large tree. A wave of joy filled his chest. He had succeeded in his first task. The next morning, he felt even more determined. He filled his bag with corn, small, tasty grains that birds loved, then set off again across the lake. Upon arrival, he hid behind a large rock and watched the area. Near the shore, 3 golden hens wandered around, their shiny feathers sparkling in the sunlight. They moved gracefully, pecking at bits of food on the ground. Kasim knew he had to be careful. Slowly, he scattered some corn, hoping to lure the hens closer. As they followed the trail of corn, Kasim felt a surge of excitement. Step by step, the hens moved toward the water, unaware of the danger ahead. Patiently, Kasim led them closer to his boat. When they were near enough, he quickly stepped forward and gently nudged them toward the boat. At first, they hesitated, but with steady hands, he guided one into the boat using a strong rope. His heart pounded, but he was determined. With one final push, he set the boat afloat, paddling swiftly away from the shore. He glanced back, making sure the giant hadn't noticed. As the boat glided through the water, a deep sense of victory filled him. The first hen sat calmly beside him, and soon the others followed. At that moment, he knew his intelligence and courage had led him to success once again. For days, Qasim remained trapped in the dark barn, his heart heavy with fear. The giant continued feeding him nuts and sweet milk, waiting for the day he would be fat enough to eat. But Qasim was not ready to give up. He knew that if he didn't find a way to escape soon, his fate would be sealed. One night, as the wind howled outside, Qasim sat in the corner of the barn, staring at the flickering lantern that hung from a wooden beam. An idea sparked in his mind. He had one chance, one final attempt to outsmart the giant. The next morning, when the giant returned to check on him, Qasim pretended to look weak and helpless. He coughed and held his stomach, moaning as if he was sick. The giant frowned. "What's wrong with you?" he growled. "I feel unwell," Qasim whispered, his voice shaky. "Perhaps the food does not agree with me." The giant scratched his head, unsure of what to do. He didn't want to eat sick meat. "Fine," he said. "I will wait a little longer." That night, while the giant snored loudly in his chamber, Qasim quietly moved to the barn door. Using his small hands, he felt along the wooden planks for a weak spot. He remembered the hole the giant had made to check on him. Carefully, he pushed against it, widening the gap little by little. After what felt like hours, he squeezed his body through the opening and ran as fast as he could. His heart pounded as he made his way toward the giant's treasure room, where the golden harp was kept. The room was guarded by a heavy iron door, but Qasim had noticed something before. When the giant entered, he always muttered a strange word under his breath. Qasim had listened carefully and memorized the sound. Taking a deep breath, he whispered, "Roktal." With a loud creak, the door unlocked. Inside, the golden harp rested on a velvet cloth, glowing softly in the moonlight. Qasim grabbed it and turned to leave, but suddenly the harp spoke. "Where are you taking me?" it asked in a soft, melodic voice. Qasim nearly dropped it in shock, but quickly regained his composure. "I am taking you to a safer place," he whispered, "but you must stay silent." The harp agreed, and Qasim hurried out. But just as he reached the barn, a deafening roar shook the ground. The giant had woken up. "Thief!" he bellowed, his massive footsteps making the earth tremble. Qasim sprinted toward his boat, gripping the harp tightly. The giant stormed after him, his eyes blazing with fury. Qasim pushed the boat into the water and jumped in, paddling with all his strength. The giant reached the shore just as Qasim got halfway across the lake. Roaring with rage, the giant reached for a boulder and hurled it at the boat. The rock crashed into the water, creating massive waves that rocked the boat violently. Qasim held on tight, fear gripping his heart. But then, the golden harp began to play a soothing melody on its own. The music was enchanting, spreading across the lake like a gentle breeze. The giant, who had been preparing to throw another boulder, suddenly stopped. His angry expression softened, and his eyes grew heavy. With a loud sigh, the giant collapsed onto the shore, fast asleep. Qasim could hardly believe it. He paddled as fast as he could, reaching the other side safely. As soon as he stepped onto land, he hid the harp with the other treasures and fell to his knees, breathless but victorious. At sunrise, Qasim returned to the palace with the 4 treasures, the golden sword, the 3 golden hens, the glowing lantern, and the enchanted harp. The entire kingdom gathered, astonished by his success. The king, who had doubted him before, now looked at him with great respect. "You have done what no warrior could," the king declared. "You have proven your courage and wisdom." Princess Layla smiled, her eyes shining with admiration. "You are not just brave, Qasim. You are clever and kind." And so, Qasim was no longer just a servant. He became a hero, and soon after, the prince of the kingdom. The villagers, who once mocked him, now told tales of his bravery for generations to come. And as for the giant, he remained asleep by the lake, never to cause trouble again. Days passed, and one morning the giant returned to the barn. He ordered the boy to stick his finger through a hole in the wall, but instead of his finger, the boy pushed out a wrapped-up stick. When the giant cut it, he believed the boy was finally fat enough to eat. Satisfied, he decided it was time to cook him. The next day, the giant told his wife to bake the boy in the oven while he went to invite his relatives for the feast. She prepared the oven and told the boy to sit on the paddle so she could push him inside. But every time he tried, he kept slipping off. Frustrated, she scolded him. The boy told her he didn't know how to sit properly. Wanting to show him, she sat on the paddle herself. At that moment, the boy quickly shoved her into the oven and slammed the door shut. He then took her fur cloak, stuffed it with straw, and placed it on the bed to trick the giant. With the giant's massive keys, he unlocked the 12 locks and grabbed the golden harp before running toward the shore, where his boat was hidden. When the giant returned, he discovered his wife was gone, and so was the harp. Enraged, he searched everywhere, only to find his wife roasted inside the oven. Overcome with fury, he ran toward the shore and spotted the boy sailing away, playing the golden harp. The music filled the air, soft and enchanting, as the boy sailed on, unaware that the giant was chasing him. The giant waded into the water, determined to catch him. But with each step, he grew weaker and more exhausted. Desperate, he tried to drink the lake dry to lower the water level, but the more he drank, the more pain he felt. Suddenly, his body swelled and burst into a massive wave, disappearing forever. The boy, now free, sailed across the lake, his heart filled with joy. He had finally defeated the evil that had haunted him for so long. When he reached the shore, he stepped out of the boat, dressed in fine clothes, his golden hair shining under the sun. He carried the giant's sword and the golden harp, with golden birds flying behind him, creating a breathtaking scene. At the royal palace, the people gathered in celebration. He placed the treasures before the princess, who smiled brightly at him. It was a moment of triumph, not just for winning the treasures, but for proving himself as a hero. He married the princess, and the kingdom rejoiced with music and laughter. Years later, the king passed away, but he left behind a wise and just ruler. The young prince led the kingdom with kindness, bringing peace and prosperity to all. His story became a legend, told for generations to come, a tale of courage, cleverness, and a boy who became a king. And that, my dear friends, is the end of our story. See you tomorrow for another exciting tale. Don't forget to follow so you won't miss it. This story is not like any other story. The title is Juha and Sleep. Without any introduction, let's dive into the events of this beautiful tale. In a small village, Juha worked hard from dawn to sunset. He plowed the land, took care of the animals, and harvested crops. But in the past few days, he started feeling an unusual exhaustion. At night, he lay in bed trying to sleep, but sleep escaped him like a mirage. Every time he closed his eyes, he drowned in thoughts about the next day's work. He tossed and turned in bed until dawn, without getting any rest. One morning, Juha decided to find a solution. He said to himself, "There must be a way to get a good night's sleep. I will ask my neighbors and friends. Maybe someone knows a magical trick to help me." First, Juha visited his neighbor, Sheikh Hakim, who was known for his wisdom. The sheikh listened to Juha's problem and then said, "Juha, sleep comes with relaxation. Try taking a warm bath before bed. It will calm your nerves." Juha thanked the sheikh and decided to try his advice. That evening, he took a warm bath. But instead of feeling relaxed, he felt refreshed, as if his body had fully awakened. Maybe a warm bath is not the solution, he thought. The next day, he went to his friend Saleh, a market vendor. Juha asked him for a remedy for sleeplessness. Saleh confidently said, "Try drinking a cup of warm milk with honey before bed. That always works for me." Juha followed the advice exactly, but instead of feeling sleepy, he felt heavy and uncomfortable. "This is not the solution either," he muttered in frustration. Then he visited his neighbor Nesma, an expert in herbs. She advised him to drink mint tea before bed. Juha tried it, but the strong mint smell made him feel fresh instead of sleepy. "It seems that all these remedies only make me more tired," he said, confused. Finally, Juha stood in the middle of his room and said to himself, "Maybe sleep doesn't need complicated solutions. Perhaps the answer is much simpler." After losing hope in all traditional solutions, Juha decided to try something new. One moonlit night, he lay on his bed, trying to sleep. But he noticed something strange. The closer he got to sleep, the further it seemed to move away, as if they were playing hide-and-seek. He thought for a moment, and then said, "If sleep is running away from me, then I will chase it until I catch it." He put on his cloak and left his house in the middle of the night, walking through the dark village streets, whispering, "Where are you, sleep? Come to me." On his way, he passed by Sheikh Hakim's house. The sheikh was sitting on his doorstep and was surprised to see Juha. He asked, "What are you doing at this late hour, Juha?" Juha seriously replied, "I am chasing sleep. It ran away from me, and I am trying to catch it." The sheikh laughed and said, "Sleep is not something you can chase, Juha." But Juha was not convinced, and continued walking until he reached the village square, which was empty under the moonlight. Suddenly, he heard a soft sound behind a tree. Excited, he said, "That must be sleep hiding behind the tree." He ran towards it, but he only found a black cat staring at him with glowing eyes. The cat meowed loudly, making Juha jump in fear. Then he heard another sound coming from the river. He eagerly said, "Maybe sleep went there." He rushed to the river, but only found a fisherman casting his net into the water. The fisherman, surprised, asked, "What are you doing here, Juha?" Juha answered seriously, "I am looking for sleep. It ran away from me." The fisherman laughed and said, "Sleep doesn't live in the river, Juha." But Juha did not give up. He continued searching until he reached a wheat field where the air was cool and the stars twinkled in the sky. He had used up all his energy from walking and running, so he sat under a big tree to rest. Suddenly, he felt something touch his shoulder. He looked around, but found no one. He whispered to himself, "Maybe sleep has finally found me." Moments later, he felt his eyelids grow heavy, his head tilted forward, and before he knew it, he fell into a deep sleep under the tree. In the morning, Juha woke up feeling more rested than ever. He looked around and finally realized that sleep had never been running away from him. It was just waiting for the right moment to come. He laughed at himself and said, "It seems that sleep doesn't need chasing, but patience and relaxation." Juha returned home, still laughing, but he knew that last night was just luck and that he still needed a permanent solution to his problem. While wandering through the village market, Juha heard a street vendor shouting, "Magic pillows! pillows that help you sleep instantly. If you suffer from insomnia, try them. Curious, Juha approached the vendor and asked, "Is this pillow really magical? Will it help me sleep?" The vendor confidently replied, "Of course. This pillow is filled with rare herbs and magical ingredients that guarantee deep sleep." Without hesitation, Juha bought the pillow and went home happily. He thought to himself, "Finally, I found the solution." That evening, he placed the magic pillow on his bed, lay down comfortably, and closed his eyes, expecting to fall asleep quickly. But minutes passed, then hours, and nothing happened. Worry crept into his mind. He kept changing his position, but sleep remained as distant as ever. In the middle of the night, he sat up, frustrated, and said loudly, "This pillow isn't magical. The vendor tricked me." Determined to find out the truth, he opened the pillow cover and found nothing but ordinary cotton and some dried herbs like mint and lemon. Juha laughed at himself and said, "I fooled myself. There's no magic. It's just a regular pillow." But he wasn't angry. Instead, he learned a new lesson. Maybe sleep doesn't need a magic pillow or complicated solutions. It just needs real comfort. Just when Juha thought he was close to solving his sleep problem, something unexpected disturbed his peace. One night, as he was getting ready for bed, he heard a loud and repeated meowing coming from outside his window. The sound was so annoying that it seemed like the cat was in a state of excitement. Juha wondered, where did this cat come from? And why is it crying so loudly at this hour of the night? He looked out his window and saw a big black cat sitting on his neighbor's wall, meowing loudly as if talking to the moon. Juha tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. Every time he was about to fall asleep, the meowing woke him up again. The next morning, Juha decided to solve the problem himself. He went to his neighbor, Sheikh Hakim, and asked, "Sheikh Hakim, is this your cat? It keeps me awake with its constant meowing." Sheikh Hakim laughed and replied, "No, Juha, this is a stray cat. No one knows where it came from." Since there was no clear solution, Juha decided to take action. That evening, he came up with a plan to get rid of the cat. He filled a bowl with water and decided to splash it on the cat whenever it came near his house. But when he tried his plan, he slipped on the ground and spilled the water all over himself instead of the cat. Juha didn't give up. He tried another plan. He placed a small fish far away from his house, hoping the cat would follow the smell and leave him in peace. But to his surprise, the cat ate the fish and then returned to the wall, meowing even louder than before. Still determined, Juha thought of a new trick. What if I put the cat in a box and take it far away from the village? He brought a box, placed some food inside, and waited for the cat to enter. As soon as it did, he rushed to close the box. But the cat was faster. It jumped out at the last second, leaving Juha running after it through the village streets in vain. After all these failed attempts, Juha sighed and said to himself, "It looks like this cat is stronger than me. Maybe I should learn to live with it instead of fighting it." The next night, he decided to try a different approach. He placed a small rug outside his window and put some food on it. Then he closed his window and went back to bed. When the cat arrived, it found the food, ate it, and then sat quietly on the rug, cleaning itself. This time, it didn't make a single noise. Juha smiled and whispered to himself, "Finally, I found the solution." The cat wasn't annoying. It was just hungry. After solving the cat problem, Juha felt that he needed a more comfortable bed to help him sleep. His old bed was rough and worn out, and he believed that buying a new one would be the final solution to his problem. In the morning, he went to the village carpenter's workshop and said, "I want a comfortable bed that will help me sleep. Can you make one for me?" The carpenter confidently replied, "Of course, Juha. I will make you the best bed in the village, comfortable and spacious." Juha paid the deposit and eagerly waited for the bed to be finished. After a few days, he returned to the workshop, excited to see his new bed. But as soon as he saw it, he was shocked. The bed was too small, barely big enough for a small child. He turned to the carpenter and said in surprise, "Is this bed for me? It's way too small." The carpenter innocently replied, "Yes, Juha, I made it according to the measurements you gave me." Juha realized that he might have made a mistake in describing the size, but he decided to try the bed anyway. That evening, he attempted to sleep on it, but his feet dangled off the edge. He tried lying on his side, but he fell to the floor because the bed was too narrow. He curled up like a cat, but he felt suffocated. Then he tried sleeping while sitting, but his back started to ache. Every attempt ended in failure, and Juha grew more frustrated. In the middle of the night, he gave up on the new bed and said to himself, "This bed isn't a solution. It's a new problem." He carried the tiny bed, placed it in a corner of the room, and returned to his old bed. Despite its roughness, at least it was big enough for him to sleep on comfortably. The doctor's strange prescription. After all his failed attempts to cure his insomnia, Juha decided to consult a specialist. He heard about a famous doctor in a neighboring village who was said to cure even the toughest cases of insomnia. One morning, he rode his donkey and headed to the village. When he arrived at the clinic, he patiently waited for his turn. Finally, he entered the doctor's office and found him sitting on a small wooden chair. The doctor smiled and said, "Welcome, Juha. What seems to be the problem?" Juha sighed and replied tiredly, "I suffer from insomnia. No matter what I do, I just can't sleep." The doctor examined him and asked several questions about his daily habits and diet. After thinking for a moment, he said seriously, "I have a magic cure for you. Before bed, you must hop on one foot for 10 minutes. This will help you fall asleep quickly." Juha looked at the doctor in disbelief and asked, "Hopping on one foot? Will that really help?" The doctor confidently replied, "Of course. This exercise will tire your body, making it easier for you to relax." Juha thanked the doctor and returned home, carrying this strange prescription. That evening, he decided to try it. He stood in the middle of his room and began hopping on one foot. At first, it seemed easy, but after a few minutes, he started feeling exhausted. He thought to himself, "Maybe this will actually work." But before he could finish his thought, he tripped and fell to the ground. He got up, aching, but was determined to continue. He tried hopping again, but this time he bumped into the table, knocking over a jug of water. Hearing the noise, his wife rushed into the room and asked in shock, "Juha, what are you doing?" Panting, he replied, "I'm following the doctor's advice. I have to hop on one foot to sleep." But Juha was determined to complete the exercise. He tried again, but crashed into his bed, collapsing onto it from exhaustion. In the end, he was so tired that he couldn't get up again. He whispered to himself, "Maybe the doctor was right. I'm really exhausted now." The next morning, Juha woke up sore all over and groaned, "Maybe hopping on one foot isn't the best solution. But at least I slept." And so, Juha continued his search for a calmer cure for his insomnia. Until one day, he heard about the secret of honey. That evening, Juha decided to follow the doctor's advice and take a spoonful of honey before bed. But then he thought to himself, If one spoon is beneficial, what if I take more? Surely I'll sleep deeply. Without hesitation, he grabbed a jar of honey and started eating greedily, spoon after spoon, until he had finished half the jar. Then he sat on his bed with confidence and said, "Now I will definitely fall into a deep sleep." But soon after, he felt a heavy sensation in his stomach. He thought to himself, "Maybe this means the honey is working." However, the heaviness turned into sharp pain, and he began tossing and turning, trying to find a comfortable position. Worried, he muttered, "Why do I feel this pain? Isn't honey supposed to be good for me?" Then he realized his mistake and sighed regretfully. "It seems I ate too much." Unable to bear the pain any longer, he got up and paced around the house, hoping to calm his stomach. He drank some water, but the discomfort remained. By midnight, he decided to go outside and breathe in the fresh air. Sitting under a tree, still in pain, he muttered, "I've ruined everything by overindulging in honey." After all his failed attempts, Juha decided to completely change his routine. He remembered a man once telling him, "Sleeping under the stars brings peace and relaxation. Try it, and you'll feel calm." Juha loved the idea and decided to give it a try. On a clear night, he took a mat and a pillow and went to the garden behind his house. Gazing at the twinkling stars, he said, "This time I will sleep soundly." He lay down on the mat and admired the stars. "How beautiful they are! They look like they're smiling at me." But instead of feeling sleepy, he noticed that the stars seemed to multiply the more he looked at them. He thought, "How many are there? Maybe if I count them, I'll get sleepy." He started counting. 1, 2, 3. But quickly realized that the task was harder than he expected. The stars were too many, and every time he finished one set, another appeared. Then he thought of another trick. What if I focus on a small part of the sky? But even that didn't work. The stars were too close together, and soon he began feeling dizzy from staring up for too long. Then another idea came to him. I'll divide the sky into sections and count each one separately. So he picked up a stick and began drawing imaginary lines in the air, trying to divide the sky into sections. But instead of helping, it only made him even more exhausted. Finally, after hours of trying, Juha felt completely drained. He sighed. "This is harder than I thought." And before he knew it, he had fallen into a deep sleep, while the stars above continued to smile down at him. One day, Juha decided to leave his village for a change of scenery. Perhaps he would find a new solution to his problem. While walking through the countryside, he noticed a shepherd sitting under a tree, looking exhausted. Juha approached him and asked, "Are you all right, my friend?" The shepherd sighed and replied sadly, "I suffer from insomnia. No matter how hard I try, I just can't sleep." Juha laughed and said, "You're just like me. I have the same problem. Maybe we can help each other." Juha suggested they try singing together to relax. They started singing, but their voices were completely out of tune, causing the sheep to scatter in all directions. The shepherd panicked and said, "This won't work. My sheep will get lost." Juha thought for a moment and then suggested, "What if we count the sheep? They say it helps with sleep." They both started counting the sheep, but soon they disagreed on the numbers. Juha said, "There are 10 sheep." The shepherd argued, "No, there are 12." The disagreement turned into a debate, which only made the sheep wander even farther. The shepherd cried out, "This isn't working! My sheep are getting lost!" Finally, Juha and the shepherd decided to sit under the tree and talk about their troubles. Juha said, "Maybe insomnia comes from overthinking." The shepherd nodded and replied, "Yes, I'm always thinking about my sheep and worrying about the future." As they shared their worries and stories, they both began to feel more relaxed. Before they knew it, they had both drifted into a deep sleep under the tree. The next morning, they woke up feeling refreshed. The shepherd smiled and said gratefully, "Thank you, Juha. You've helped me more than you can imagine." Feeling some improvement in his sleep, Juha decided to try another method he had heard from a friend: taking a hot bath before bed. His friend had told him, "A hot bath relaxes your muscles and calms your nerves, making it easier to sleep." That evening, Juha decided to follow the advice. He filled his bathtub with hot water and added some aromatic oils, as he had heard they helped with relaxation. As he soaked in the warm water, he sighed in relief and said, "This time, I'll sleep like a baby." But as he enjoyed the warmth, he started feeling drowsy. He thought, "Maybe I should just sleep here in the tub." Before he realized it, he had dozed off. The problem was that the water was still running, and the tub was filling up quickly. Soon, the water overflowed, spreading all over the bathroom and seeping into the next room. At that moment, Juha woke up to the sound of splashing water. He jumped up to turn off the tap, but the floor was too slippery. He lost his balance and fell, exclaiming, "What a disaster!" After finally shutting off the water, he spent hours drying the floor and cleaning up the mess. Completely exhausted, he slumped onto the couch and muttered to himself, "I wanted to relax, but I created a catastrophe instead." And so, Juha learned that while relaxation is important, it must be done carefully. He decided to try other, less chaotic methods in the future. One evening, Juha decided to try his friend's advice in his own way. "If one spoonful of honey is good, what if I eat more?" he thought. He ate half the jar, convinced he would sleep deeply. But soon, he felt a heavy pain in his stomach. Trying to ease the discomfort, he walked around, drank water, and even sat in the garden, regretting his overeating. Desperate, he remembered a tip. Sleeping under the stars promotes relaxation. He lay in his backyard, admiring the twinkling sky. "Maybe counting stars will help me sleep," he thought. But the stars were too many. He tried dividing the sky into sections, but that only exhausted him more. Finally, the effort wore him out, and he drifted into deep sleep. One day, Juha met a tired shepherd. "I suffer from insomnia," the shepherd admitted. Juha laughed. "Me too. Let's help each other." They tried singing, but their terrible voices scared the sheep. "This won't work," the shepherd cried. "Let's count the sheep," Juha suggested. But they argued over the numbers and lost track of the flock. Defeated, they sat under a tree, sharing their worries. As they talked, their minds eased, and before they knew it, they both fell into a peaceful sleep. In the morning, the shepherd smiled. "Thank you, Juha." Talking helped more than anything. Determined to sleep better, Juha tried a hot bath. He added aromatic oils, sighed in delight, and soon felt drowsy. "Maybe I can sleep right here," he murmured. But the water kept running. As he dozed off, the tub overflowed, flooding the house. Startled awake, Juha scrambled to stop the water but slipped, crashing to the floor. "What a disaster!" he groaned. Exhausted from cleaning up, he collapsed onto the couch. "I just wanted to relax, not cause a flood," he sighed, vowing to find a safer way to sleep next time. But the problem was that the water kept flowing, gradually overflowing from the tub. After a while, the water flooded the bathroom and then seeped into the adjacent room. Suddenly, Juha woke up in a panic to find himself in the middle of a water puddle. He quickly got up, trying to stop the water, but slipped on the wet floor and fell hard, shouting, "What a mess!" After managing to control the situation, he spent hours drying the floor and cleaning up. Finally, he sat on the couch, exhausted, and said resignedly, "It seems a hot bath isn't such a great idea, especially if I'm going to sleep in it." And so Juha realized that relaxation is important, but it needs to be done cautiously. He decided to look for other, less chaotic ways to solve his problem after all his failed attempts to sleep. In the morning, Juha went to the village square and called the people to gather around him. He stood among them with a calm smile and said, "My friends, I want to share something important with you. I've been on a long journey with insomnia, trying every possible way, from magical pillows to hopping on one foot. But in the end, I found that the solution was right in front of me all along, simple and easy." One of the neighbors stepped forward and asked curiously, "And what is this solution, Juha?" Juha responded while pointing to the vast sky, "Relaxation and surrendering to rest. There's no need to search for complicated solutions. Just sit in a quiet place, listen to the wind, gaze at the stars, and let sleep come to you peacefully." The people began talking about their struggles with insomnia and how they had tried various methods without success. One said, "I've tried all kinds of teas and herbs, but I still can't sleep well." Another added, "I bought the most expensive pillows, yet I still don't feel comfortable." Juha laughed and said, "I was just like you. But now, after learning the lesson, I want to teach you how to sleep peacefully." He then began teaching them simple relaxation techniques, like deep breathing and listening to calming sounds. He told them, "Don't think too much about sleep. Just relax and let sleep come to you naturally." That night, the villagers followed Juha's advice. They sat in their yards, listening to the wind and watching the stars. The next morning, one of them said joyfully, "I slept deeply for the first time in years." A woman added, "I woke up feeling refreshed and full of energy. Thank you, Juha." Thus, Juha became not just a man who told stories, but a wise teacher in his village. People came to him for advice, not just about sleep, but about life as well. One day, a neighbor asked him, "Juha, how do you live with such simplicity and peace?" Juha smiled and replied, "Life isn't as complicated as we think. The important thing is to live it moment by moment, and not to overthink the future or the past." The villagers began applying Juha's philosophy to their daily lives and said, "If sleep requires relaxation and simplicity, maybe everything in life needs that too." Juha lived a life full of contentment and happiness. He spent his days working simply in the fields and his nights under the sky, surrounded by friends and loved ones. One night, while sitting in his yard, a group of children approached him and asked eagerly, "Juha, how did you become so wise?" Juha laughed and said, "Wisdom doesn't come from easy experiences, but from failed attempts. I've tried many things that didn't work, but I learned from them." One of the children asked, "Can we learn from you?" Juha replied, gently patting his head, "Of course, my little ones. Wisdom is learning from our mistakes and living life with simplicity and joy." Thus, Juha became not just a storyteller, but a teacher of life. Everyone lived in peace and happiness, and the spirit of simplicity and joy spread everywhere. Finally, Juha looked up at the sky and said to himself, "Life is beautiful when we live it with a calm heart and a simple mind, and thank God for everything." And so, we come to the end of our story for today. If you liked the story, don't forget to support us by subscribing to the channel and encouraging us to bring more interesting stories.